between AI, technology, society, and culture, setting the stage for today's discussions. And today, we are honored to have with us Dr. Recuero, a distinguished scholar from Brazil. Recuero is a professor and researcher at the Center for Literature and Communication at the Federal University of Pelotas and at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. She is the coordinator of the Media, Discourse, and Social Network Analysis Research Laboratory, and her research focuses on discourse and communication processes on digital platforms, notably centered on violent and toxic discourses and disinformation. Her speech for today is titled Big Data Infrastructures and Cultural Narratives. Welcome again, Professor Recuero. And we are aware that it is too early, in fact, around 5 a.m. in Brazil now. So thanks a lot for your devotion. We really appreciate it. And we are delighted to have you with us today. So without further ado, I leave the stage to you. Please.
So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, even though it's 5 a.m. It's not a problem. Thank you so much. So I'll start my presentation. Let me see if you can. Yeah. So first of all, again, thank you for inviting me to be here with you all today. It's a pleasure. And my talk will focus on how big data infrastructures can shape cultural narratives, or how can they manipulate these narratives. So we'll talk a little bit about a particular type of big data infrastructure that I study, social media platforms. Just to give you some background, I come from linguistics, so I use a lot of critical discourse analysis and also from communication. So the perspective I'll bring today to you is this one from discourse, from language and narratives. So first of all, we need to discuss a few concepts. So we are all on the same page. So first of all, what are big data infrastructures? What are we talking about? So as you have seen, and as you probably have discussed previously on this conference, big data infrastructures are a name we use for those gigantic infrastructures of data collection, data storage, data processing, data management, and data analytics. So why is this important? Because these infrastructures, they now take a large place in our lives, right? And one particular type of big data infrastructures are platforms. So this is a concept that was first used on social media research by Talton Gillespie in 2010. He claimed in his work that platforms are like a name, a concept that is used by those digital companies sometimes to call themselves and to run away from some responsibilities. And this concept was furthermore discussed by other researchers, and they started discussing how these platforms, how these technologies, how these companies, they became huge. So as you can see in my illustration, when I talk about this to my students, I like to make a parallel to a movie from the 50s and then the 80s. I don't know if you know about it. It's called The Blob. It's a story about this giant slimy bubble. It's a terror story. And this bubble starts eating everything and growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is exactly what platforms do. They simply incorporate other services that also influence our lives. And because they are able to do this, they can shape our interactions. they can shape our industries, and they can shape the public discourse. Paul Nieborg and Van Dyke and the Wall are some researchers who discussed platforms, and they say that platforms have like three main characteristics or elements, so to say. First one, datification. So they can collect, they can use a lot of data from people, right? They have algorithm governance. So they have like these tools that share what's going to be seen, that decide what's going to be deleted or not. And they also created a phenomenon through which our industries, for example, journalism, became dependent of them. You probably lived during COVID-19 pandemic a lot online, because these platforms were the space for us to keep contact with the people we liked, with the people that were at home because they were sick or because they were taking precautions or measures to not get sick. We became dependent of these tools. So we don't know how to live without them. And I think this is important because one particular type of platform is my main goal, my main objective to discuss with you: social media platforms. These platforms, they have like an even huger influence in our lives and how we see the world. So social media platforms are platforms that are focused on people and people's interaction. So basically what they do is they collect our data from interaction, from our profiles, and they sell the data, but they sell how they are going to show content to certain types of people, to certain types of certain profiles. And because they do this, and they are so huge, and see how they are like the blob. I told you that in the beginning. Because, for example, Meta. Meta is a platform that at the early beginning, it was only one thing: Facebook. But Facebook started incorporating or buying other company services. So, for example, Twitter, that was a competitor. What did Facebook do? They create the feed because they were copying Twitter, because Twitter didn't want to sell the company to them. So that's the process. If they weren't able to buy your technology, they would copy and incorporate it in their services. So they did this with multiple companies: Snapchat, Instagram, that later they bought. And today they are like one of the biggest social media platforms in the world, because they have Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and several other services. So social media platforms, they became like the main place where the people go to interact, to talk to other people. In some countries like Brazil, almost 8% of the population go to social media platforms to receive information like news, information like where their friends are. So they're not using other systems to get informed. They're using social media platforms mostly. So because they have this power, and because they have those algorithms that show what they think we want to see, they increase a lot of problems. They generate a lot of problems that we did have before, but now those problems have superpowers. For example, polarization. So polarization is a theme that has frequently been talked about in our society. Social media platforms algorithms, they are able to increase this polarization because they simply don't show you what they think you don't want to know. But see, if we want to have a healthy society, we have to know things we don't want to know, right? We cannot choose, because we need to know what is happening in our neighborhood, in our country. We need to have information to make better decisions in our everyday life. And some of this information is things we are not so much interested in, but we need to receive. are information that we won't look for, but we need to receive. So social media platforms, because they have like this way of functioning where they want you to be online to interact as much as possible, because then they can make money. Their economic model is based on how much we interact, because every time we interact, they have more users, they have more content, and that increases the value of the platform. So they, because of those algorithms that govern content, they increase polarization, because they're only going to show you content that you agree, that you want to see. And nobody wants to see what they don't agree with, what they don't care about. So they separate society. Some authors call this destructive polarization, in the sense that it destroys the public sphere, it destroys public debate. It also a place that is very good for disinformation and disinformation systems. So when we're talking about disinformation here, we're not just talking about false content. Let's think about how social media platforms disinform. They can, for example, frame a truthful information as something false. It's very easy. For example, we know that vaccines can prevent disease, but sometimes they have side effects. So I can simply focus on the side effects. I'm not lying. I'm not saying anything that is untruthful, but the framing I'm giving to this information gives people another impression of what vaccines are, right? Platforms, they influence regulations, and we'll talk a little bit about this later. And they also, because they want interaction, they spread and legitimate toxic and violent discourses, because violence creates a lot of interaction. It's polemic. So people go and interact. Sometimes we have both bots, AI bots, spreading violent discourses, because they generate interaction, because they generate value for the person who is spreading disinformation, who is spreading violence, and also for the platform. Another important concept here are narratives. So what are narratives? And from my perspective, from critical discourse analysis, they are like ways we understand reality. They are ways. Narratives are stories, right? That's how we think about them. But they are not just stories. They present the world to us. They make sense of our social identities. They create power relations and ideologies. So I like to think about narratives as networks of meanings. So it's like we hear the stories, we hear the information, and we have like all these pieces that we can connect every time we receive something new, and we remember the story. We remember what this piece of information must be connected with. For example, everybody probably has seen the scene of Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky at the Oval Office at the White House a few days ago. And these two images are internet memes, are jokes about what happened. What is important here is, because we have the story, because we learn what happened, we can see this piece of content and make sense of it. And when we make sense of this piece of content, we connect it to the other stories that we heard and that we had contact with. And that's how we interpret this content, right? So we can find the fun, the joke, because we have the context that is set by this narrative that we already had contact with. So how social media platforms, how they influence narratives? So I think it's important to understand, first of all, that they influence those narratives through datafication, through algorithms, through the way platforms are structured, because they want us to have contact with certain types of information because they want our data, because they want us to be online. And I'm not saying that social media platforms, they are like evil geniuses that are like, ha, 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 we will steal your data. It's not about that. It's about money. It's about how much money they make when you're online. It's about how much money they make if they don't fight the information. It's about how much money they make if they have a ton of AI bots creating content. It's interaction, it's content. The monthly active users is a number that is tied to the value of the platform. So when these monthly active users rises, the value rises. It doesn't matter if they are a lot of bots. What matters is there is movement, there is interaction, right? Because the investors, they don't know that those are bots. They don't know that there is a lot of false interaction. They think that people are there too, and people are being influenced by those contents. So here, for example, you can see a YouTube page. You can log in YouTube, and you have a lot of recommendations. All of these recommendations are created by AI services that try to show you more content connected to what you have seen previously. So they are trying to fish you so you can say more time online. So you can spend more time online. So you can spend more of your time interacting and watching videos, because that's how they make money, right? Okay. So what I'm saying here is that social media platforms today, they are infrastructures of manipulation. And they do this through narratives. So they can manipulate the narratives. They can, and this is a key point, they can erase memory and cultural constructions of different types of people, of nations, of anyone. And the discourse can be controlled and challenged by those platforms. So we have a very particular case here in Brazil. As some of you probably know, most of South American countries have lived through a very strong military dictatorship for many years. And a lot of people disappeared and were killed, and some people were never ever heard about again. So they have no information. Where are they? Where are the corpses? Anything. In Brazil, on the last 3 years, 3 to 5 years, we have a rise on a different narrative. Politicians, mostly, they have been saying online that Brazil never had a dictatorship. Brazil had a military government. And see, when I change the words, I change the impact of the story. It was a military government. It wasn't a dictatorship. And they are framing this military government as something that was there for the people, to help the people. So no one died. This is a lie. So there was freedom. There were elections. No, there weren't. And this is a way that you erase memory, because you convince people that the past they know wasn't exactly like they heard. And social media platforms, they are enabling this, because when those people publish those stories, they get tons of likes, they had tons of comments, and they spread. So when people receive this content, they think, maybe, I don't remember, I wasn't alive during this government. Maybe this is right. Yeah, maybe. And then they receive it again. And then they receive it again. And then they had like thousands of likes. And then people are influenced, because that many people cannot be wrong. Everybody is saying this is correct. So maybe I don't remember what happened. Maybe I don't know what happened. So you see, this content, it's not just spread, it is pre-legitimated by shares, likes, hearts. So it's not just content that you receive and you can discuss. It's content that comes to you with accordance from the general population because you just received tons of people liking it. And this can be done to different types of content. So it's a problem. Because you see, this wouldn't be possible without those infrastructures. If we did not have platforms, if we did not have algorithms deciding what you should see. Here is another important narrative that happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. So in Brazil, other countries as well, we had like this idea that was spread online that COVID had medicine that you could take to prevent the infection. So hydroxychloroquine and antibiotics, azithromycin. I don't know the word in English, but it's probably very similar. Chloroquine is something that you take to malaria. It's a medicine for the parasite that causes the disease. So it doesn't make anything to COVID because it's a virus. However, social media platforms is the perfect place to spread this idea that there was a conspiracy. You had no pandemic. You could just take this every day. And we actually did have a lot of people going to the hospital sick because they took those medications like crazy to prevent infection. And social media platforms, they legitimate this type of content because it's still online. It's still online. And if you can see here, it has some shares, some likes, but it has an impact on people because they see this and they see a lot of people are sharing or liking. Sometimes they receive this from trusted connections, from people they admire, like politicians, authorities. Sometimes they receive this from people they trust, like family, like friends. So it's a content that has an impact on people and change their perceptions. If you want to try and see how this can change your perception, one day go to YouTube and search for flat Earth. It's something that you see tons of videos and like tons of videos with rational arguments that even make sense. Even though they are crazy, they make sense and they will make you question your trust because there's so many people talking about this. Maybe I'm wrong because we are social beings. We are influenced by what others say. We're influenced by the decisions others make. And in general, we are influenced by the narratives that others legitimate because that's how we are wired as a society. We are not individuals. We base our behavior on what other people do. So one example of also framing a narrative, and this time not from a social media platform, although this happened also with social media platforms. So because of COVID and disinformation, Brazil started to discuss a regulation from social media platforms. This regulation was dubbed Fake News Law Project. So PL, Law Project, Fake News PL. And when the National Congress started discussing this, how platforms use their homepages. And you see here, Google's home. When you go to do the search in Brazil, they added like this little line that says, the Fake News Law Project can increase confusion about what is truthful or lie in Brazil. So they actively made campaign online against a regulation of the country that was being discussed. Meta tools, Facebook, Instagram, they all had like this message when you logged in saying something similar to this, that the politicians are trying to misguide you, the law project is bad, blah, 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 blah. This is something that we never seen in any other country. It's a kind of interference on regulation that is very important, because you see how platforms are using their power to influence public opinion. And this is not something implicit. This is very explicit. And they were actually able to stop the discussion. So the law project is still in the Congress, but the discussion stopped. And this is also important because what they are doing, they are framing the narrative about disinformation. They are using their power to frame the narrative about what is happening in the country. And they were successful. So I'm bringing out those ideas to you so we can talk a little bit about the role of AI, because we have the perfect storm with AI. With AI, you can more clearly and more strongly influence everything that is happening. It can influence the production of content, as we have seen on Facebook. The number of pages that is spread content clearly generated by AI on Facebook has increased like by the tons in the last years. You can see here a picture that was made by an AI, and you probably can see, but the eyes of the woman are fingers, because it was an AI generated image. She is in a bed of, and I think that is like Jesus Christ's hands that had a lot of fingers. And this is published on several pages. And you have pages that publish content about actors, Hollywood actors, pages that publish content about tourism, pages that, why are they doing this? It seems harmless, but they are trying to improve engagement on the page. And when people engage, when some of this content goes viral, they scam people. They use they harvest, because when you are the owner of a page, you can harvest certain types of data from the people who like your page. So it has an impact. They are producing content, and this content can also be disinformative, for example. This content can be biased, can be framed. There are a lot of newspapers and journalists using AI to create content, to automate the creation of content, which could be good, but could also be a problem, as this content can be very biased if no one checks for it, especially like content from the last minute. And this content can also be disinformative, as AI can frame or can bias this content in some way. We also have a lot of an important role on distribution of content. So AIs, they are very smart in interfering with recommendation algorithms, which are also based on AI. And for example, they use a lot of hashtags of things that are trending, so they can bring people to their pages. They want to influence narratives. They can influence narratives through visibility, so they can spam sometimes the certain content to so they can influence the algorithm, and this content can be shown to more people. And they also can have a lot of engagement, because people like AI, for example, on TikTok, you have a lot of those AI videos of waking up in some world thing that happened, for example, World War II. So you have like this AI generated video, and it's cool, it's interesting, but why are people doing this? And what are the impacts? Is this like truthful? Is this like fiction? What is this? So we have to think about this role as well, and also the role of AI on the interpretation of the content that is circulating. Because, for example, Facebook uses as you know, they don't have fact checkers anymore, and they use often AI fact checking. And there's a ton of research showing that AI fact checking can be biased and can take down content that is truthful, that doesn't have the information, right? So this also can create false or biased narratives, as it can show people narratives that don't exist. They can make false connections to meanings that people already have. So what I'm trying to say here, and I'm finishing, these infrastructures, they platformize social interaction. So they make social interaction, they make us, people, dependent of their infrastructures. And then they harvest our data, our interactions, and our cultural creations, such as our narratives. And they profit on it. And because they do this, they also have the power to influence these narratives, to create memories, to erase memories, to shape narratives and the discourse in a certain society. And because they can do all this, they can also shape society. They can also shape our perceptions of the world. So I finish with a question that I think is very important for all of us as researchers to think, is how are these infrastructures shaping our research and our perceptions? Because when they shape narratives, they also shape what we are going to research. When they shape, just to give you a quick example, when they close APIs for research, they turn us somewhere. They turn us to a different story. And we go. When they open APIs, they also give us data that they control. So Facebook now, there is an access through the API that is very controlled. What are the data they are giving researchers on those APIs? I don't have access, so I cannot tell you, but how this data can shape our research and can shape our perceptions, right? So the goal of my talk today was just give you some ideas for you to think. I hope it was useful. Thank you very much. And I finish here.
Dr. Recuero, thank you for this thought-provoking and illuminating keynote. Your exploration of big data infrastructures and cultural narratives has given us much to reflect, in fact, and you left us with a very important question. So let's open the floor for discussion. We have 15 minutes of Q&A session. So I invite you to share your questions and reflections as well. You can raise your hand, use the chat function, or you may just simply speak up if you have the co-host authorization. Any questions?
I have a question.
Please.
Thank you very much. This is a very good, very inspiring presentation today. I would like to ask one question, Professor Raquel. You said that the government in Brazil is trying to prevent fake news through regulations, right? Is that what I understood correctly? Do you think this is possible through regulating internet, regulating Google and social media platforms through establishing some regulating bodies, or do you agree with the government steps?
So I just answer, or do you want me to wait for more questions?
Yeah, I think answering will be all right.
So thank you for your question. What do I think? I think platforms are too big for just one nation to regulate. But I think this is an important discussion, international discussion, because they are like the biggest country in the world, and they can influence every country in the world. So, and this is a private space, right? This is a private entity. And my question is also about sovereignty. How can something be bigger than your country and not be subject to the regulations of your country? So what they were discussing, I'm not defending the law here, but I think we need to discuss this in an international level. They're trying to do something similar to what Europe did. So they have like some rules about users' data. They cannot leave the country. You cannot show them to everyone. Brazilians' data, for example, it's similar to European data. So they have to storage in Europe. They cannot sell. They cannot storage everywhere else, in other countries. I think we need to think of alternatives because we cannot have so much power in a private entity that has other interests. I think we need to guarantee that countries can fight what is a crime in the country, because that's a question of how the country works. The law in Brazil, I think, as it would be not harmful. I mean, it wouldn't have a lot of effect. Basically, platforms would have to take down content that was disinformative, particularly during elections. And by disinformative content, I'm talking about that content that was like crazy content. So, for example, during one of the elections, we had a lot of content circulating on social media platforms about how one of the candidates, I don't know how I'm going to say this. One of the candidates were trying to sexually influence children through bottles, like milk bottles. And this was like totally crazy. I mean, they had like this AI generated images of bottles with like penises. And I was like, this is irrational, but it circulated a lot. We have content like this fake, the medicine that was used to COVID. How do we stop this? Because this actually has an effect on people. It made people sick. It made people die even because they believed in this type of content. So we need something. I don't think we need just international regulation. I think we need perhaps a treaty, perhaps something that will say you have to take care of your content. You cannot just allow everything to spread like without control just because you're making money. And you cannot have content that is criminal, for example, violent, toxic. And when I say violent, for example, it's very hard for normal people to take down content that is aggressive against them. For example, bullying. It's a huge problem because it actually make adolescents and youth try suicide because they are bullied online and there's no way to take down this content. And platforms say they have no responsibility because it's not forbidden. And this is a huge problem, especially for young people. And now people are students, they are, they have AI, so they are doing like this very sexually explicit AI generated videos of their colleagues, and they're spreading online. And who is responsible for this? And I think that, for example, I have a degree in law in Brazil. So if you provide the infrastructure to cause harm, you are responsible for the harm done, because you have a legal obligation to stop this harm because you're providing the way for it to happen, right? So I think we need something. I don't know if this law project is like what we need. I think it's not good as it is, but I think we need to discuss this. And what social media platforms are trying to do is, hey, no, You don't have to discuss this. Everything is okay. You know, and we know this is not okay. So, long story short, I think we need to discuss regulation. Yes. I don't know if this regulation, like Brazil is proposing, is the best. We have some cases in Europe. United States also has regulations, right? But we need to discuss this. Otherwise, countries that don't have regulation, they will become data colonies, because they have, like, you can do whatever you want in those countries.
Thank you very much.
I think Fabio Ribeiro has a question, please.
Thank you, Raquel, for your outstanding remarks, and thank you for your collaboration. I have a challenge for you and for the Turkish colleagues that are with us. Imagine that you sit in a bar and ask people about AI, artificial intelligence. What kind of perceptions, because you talk about it quite often, and what kind of perceptions would you find in Brazil with the in a more ordinary scope? And I would like the Turkish colleagues as well to give me an insight, because from the Portuguese side, I would say that people are still very either numb or completely fascinated with AI. Thank you very much.
So yeah, this is a very good question. So let's say that tech-savvy people in Brazil, they know AI, and they're mostly fascinated with AI. And I think we have two problems here. First one is people see AI as an oracle. Like, I don't know if you have seen the Iron Man movie. It's like Jarvis, the butler, there is an AI. So it's there to solve all your problems, to have all the answers. And this is very dangerous, because if you are using AI, you have to know that they are biased, that it's a software. It's not sentient yet, right? But people think of it as an oracle. People literally talk their problems to AI. And this is problem number one. Problem number two is people who are not tech savvy. And to them, they don't know when a content is AI generated or not. They don't know, and often they don't care who is doing the content they are reading, who is sharing the information they are receiving. And to these people, it's even worse, because they don't have the clarity that this was an automated generated content. So it's disinformative, because they get it as true. And people who are not tech savvy, they also tend to go to social media and think that the content there is similar to news. People actually say in the streets things like, "Hey, have you heard about blah blah, some event, some fact?" And then you say, "No, where have you seen it?" "Oh, it was on Facebook." Like, it was a news service. Not a lot of people talking about anything, even imaginary things. So people take this as true. They take this as content. They take this as part of the narrative about the world. And this is very dangerous. And AI just makes it worse.
Thank you, Professor Ribeiro. Any Turkish colleagues who would like to answer Fabio's questions? I think our answer will not be very different than what Professor Ribeiro already mentioned, right? Any other questions? I think we don't have any other questions. So thank you once again, Dr. Raquel Recuero, for your insightful presentation and for your answers. We can start at 12 o'clock with the session 4. It is 12 o'clock Turkish time zone and 9 o'clock for Portuguese time. The session 4 will be titled AI and Society, Influence, Perception, and the Digital Future. And I think we have a couple of minutes to take a break before it. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for joining. And see you in a couple of minutes.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.